Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Chartered Accountants Ulster Society webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jason McIntosh, and I am the convener of the Chartered Accountants and Business Subcommittee of the Ulster Society. The subcommittee aims to ensure that society remains relevant for and supportive to Chartered Accountants working in business. We aim to do this through a calendar of relevant events and contents for our members, both informative and networking in nature. Although, like today's webinar, often our events are relevant for wider society members as well. In the next couple of months, we will have a number of events coming up, including the second in this short series on AI on the 29th of May, and I'll talk more about that in my closing remarks today. I would encourage you to keep an eye on emails and newsletter content from the Institute to make sure you keep up to date with our events as and when they happen. After today's event, you will receive a request for feedback and would very much welcome the opportunity to hear feedback both on today's event and also on our calendar of events more generally, either by filling out that feedback request or by getting in touch with me directly. Without further ado, let's move on to the content of today's webinar, which is titled AI and the Human Differentiator. AI is certainly one of the topics at the forefront of many of our members' minds, and hopefully you will find this mini-series informative and enjoyable. I'm delighted to be joined today by two fantastic speakers who will help to guide us through what AI actually is, generative AI, and the human differentiator within it. Tim Cush is a partner in EY's technology consulting practice and leads the intelligent automation team across Ireland. Tim has 18 years of experience working with public and private sector clients, helping organizations realize value through emerging technology speakers. Our second speaker is Marianna Imprialou, a director in EY's data and analytics practice. Marianna is a lead data scientist with over 12 years of experience and specializes in designing and deploying data analytics solutions to enable better business decisions. To make our sessions interactive as possible today, I would encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A function on Zoom as our speakers cover their content. There is a dedicated Q&A section at the end of today's session, and I know the topic is one that many of you are thinking about, so I do expect to see lots of questions coming through. Finally, I want to remind you that this session is being recorded and will be made available to members later. With that, I'm going to stop speaking and I'm going to hand over to the experts in Tim and Marianna. Tim and Marianna, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here and really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We've got a packed agenda over the course of the next hour or so, and we're delighted to be able to share with you some of these insights and some of our hands-on experience in terms of just what exactly we're seeing in the market. So first of all, we're going to kick off, and Marianna and I are going to do a little bit of a double act. We're going to take you through a bit of an introduction into specifically generative AI, specifically in the context of how it fits into AI more broadly. We're going to talk a little bit around then how AI embeds into the workplace and just some of the examples that we've seen in terms of how it can be used as a differentiator in terms of how we do our jobs today. To help bring that to life, then we've got some demos, show you some practical examples of where we've seen it being deployed, and then lastly, we've, as Jason mentioned, we've covered some time for Q&A. So I suppose really just to kind of give a little bit of an introduction, as Jason kind of mentioned already, I lead out the intelligent automation capability for EY across the island of Ireland. I suppose really just in terms of a little bit about my background, I'm not necessarily a data scientist or an AI developer or an automation developer, but I am someone who's been able to use the emerging technologies to be able to really help deliver value back into organizations, with a real focus on value obviously being the forefront. Marianna, do you want to give just a quick introduction to yourself?
Sure, thanks, Tim. So I am a data scientist in contrast to Tim, but don't be scared because in this presentation we are not analyzing in depth any AI algorithms or getting into the weeds of Python development or anything like that. So we are aiming to take you into a journey to first of all, explain some key definitions. What is AI? Why are we using? Why do we have so much hype and so much interest lately about AI? And then hopefully give you some advice on how to use best AI in order to get business results. And we finalize the session actually with four very useful practical applications of generative AI at the moment, which I believe that you will find interesting. Let's get started.
Thanks, Marianna. So really kind of to kick things off, I'm going to ask a little bit about a question, or pose a bit of a question to you all. And as that's in the context of AI, and I guess that question is, are we in an evolution or a revolution? And I'll maybe just pause that thought for a second and come back to it in a few moments. really this to kind of kick off the conversation. We did a survey this time last year, actually, with a large number of 1,200 CEOs and C-suite executives globally, just to really understand a little bit around the interpretation of how AI has been perceived in the workplace. And what was really interesting was that 65% of the CEOs that were interviewed recognized the real potential of AI to significantly drive productivity and deliver positive outcomes for stakeholders. However, those same 65% also addressed or acknowledged the fact that there's significant work still needs to be done just around addressing some of the social, the ethical, some of the risks, and some of the more broader concerns around just in terms of AI adoption and rolling it out. So a little bit of a balance between excitement and caution. I guess just to go back to my question around the evolution or the revolution, really kind of to help bring that to life, I'm going to use a little bit of an analogy. Many of you probably had a Nokia 3210 phone, and for those of you too young to remember it, it's probably one of the most robust phones I ever certainly had. It was waterproof, kid-proof, bomb-proof. It's probably still stuck in a drawer somewhere, fully charged. It had a really addictive game. It was like Tetris. It was called Snake. But it was really, really, really addictive. But essentially, it was probably about 8 or 9 years later before we saw the mobile phone industry revolutionized in the context of the launch of the iPhone. That really transformed the whole way in which we interacted with the mobile phone. It changed from just a device that we were able to essentially call and text to something where we had actually the World Wide Web and much more at our fingertips. I guess the question we have is, in the context of AI, are we in a revolution or evolution? We'll come back to that question maybe shortly, just at the end of the presentation. So AI has been around for many, many decades. In fact, actually, it was a term that was initially coined back in the 1940s as a reference to engineering of machines that essentially mimic cognitive functions. Over the course of the next number of decades, we've seen a number of advancements in the form of machine learning and then deep learning. And then in the last number of years, obviously, we've had the launch of generative AI. I guess maybe just to pose a question back to Marianna at this point, why do you think generative AI in particular is such a game changer?
For many reasons. So let's start with definitions. And if for people that are not very familiar with generative AI or AI in general, if there is one learning from this session I would like to keep as a takeaway, is this one difference between AI and generative AI. Traditional AI, which is all the forms of AI that we have interacted up to the point of 2022, when the first generative AI's algorithms become through ChatGPT and other similar applications available, have one similar characteristics. All the outputs of the algorithms are numbers that mean something, but in order to get this meaning, you need specially trained people, data scientists, AI experts like me, to get into, let's say, the user understanding what the output actually means. Generative AI, among the many other differences that are quite technical, and we won't go to them, has one key characteristic. For the first time, the outputs are not just numbers, and it can be free text, it can be music, it can be audio, it can be video, so it can be something that can be digested immediately by the users. And that's why we see, in my opinion, for the first time, AI coming so close to the user, becoming something much more approachable and understandable, and hence the significant increase in the interest lately. So if we go to the next slide, when there is excitement, though, about a new technology, there is also a high level of hype. And what we see here is what we call the traditional technology hype cycle, which happens and has happened and has been observed in many, many different circumstances in various technologies. It always starts like a honeymoon period. So at the very beginning, a new technology is released, and gradually everyone and everywhere, they believe that they can solve each and every problem that they have in the business with this new technology. The excitement is a lot, the expectations are high, there is potentially a lot of investment. And then naturally, these expectations to an extent are falling to the extent that sometimes cause a lot of disappointment. If I would say that if I would have to take into account all the things that we have seen so far, when it comes to generative AI, I think that we hit the peak of inflated expectations in December, around Christmas time last year. Approximately 1 year precisely after ChatGPT was released, and there was this big bang of technology, of generative AI technology. And I think that we are already going a little bit down, going a little bit more pragmatic of what this technology can achieve, which is a healthy state. But the question is, Tim, how do we not avoid the big disappointment?
Yeah, it's a great question, Marianna, who's a technologist at heart and gets all too excited by emerging technologies and new technologies. I'm very familiar with this hype cycle. And I guess really just to answer your question, then, Marianna, I suppose we are heading down into that trough of disillusionment. And I guess there's probably a number of different reasons for that. There's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement in the market. And I guess organizations are probably in that stage whereby they've invested in some POCs. They haven't seen that real positive output that they were expecting. And that's naturally led to that sort of a little bit of confusion, bit of disillusionment in terms of just what does this actually look like for my organization? What we really encourage all of our clients and organizations to do is push through, through that slope of enlightenment, get to that place of that plateau of productivity, where there's a much more balanced implementation approach, and you start to see that real return on investment, that value coming straight through. So I guess the question is there a way to be able to navigate from the peak of inflated expectations over to that plateau of productivity, avoiding that trough of disillusionment and that slope of enlightenment? And we think absolutely there is. There's probably a couple of key things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit more detail throughout the presentation, but it's essentially making sure that you choose the right use case, you choose the technology, and you understand exactly what it is that you want the technology to deliver for you in your business.
And in light of that, the question is, what business really want? So many of you at this point now, because it's quite a well-penetrated product, you have used ChatGPT or something similar. And you might know that in order to get an answer that actually really replies the question that you have posed and actually generates the text or the answer that you want, you have to be very specific with your requirements. So you have to be able to know what you really want to get what you want from ChatGPT or a generative AI algorithm, and this is true. This is a very good parallel of what businesses need to do from AI in general to be successful in their AI journey. A business that wants to do something with AI, but they are not specific enough and they cannot specify what they really want to get out of it, it's very likely to do something impressive or fun or interesting, but not something that actually has real business value to them. And this is where sometimes the disappointment comes into play, and we see successful implementations of AI, but not necessarily what we really want to achieve. And then practically AI is not that useful and gets a little bit less impact than we want to be. So first stop in the AI journey is understanding the pain points, what we would like to solve, what we really want. And the question is to ask, if I want to get what I really want, do I know what I really want so I can go and get it for AI?
Yeah, and I guess really just to kind of distill that down, what we've done is probably divided up into 3 different buckets based on some of the conversations that we've seen with our clients. So that first area is around use cases. It's really understanding, exactly what you want to do with AI, why, and how you're going to do it. I've seen an absolute plethora of different ideas. I've never seen a mural board filled with so many digital sticky notes in all my career of different potential ideas of where AI could be used. But it's really about trying to understand exactly what it is that you want to deliver from AI, and making sure you select those use cases that are going to deliver the most amount of impact into your organization. Similarly, from a technology perspective, the big question that we're getting from a lot of our clients is, do we build it or do we buy it? And what I mean by that is, do we build the capability internally and then start to actually use that capability to custom develop specific AI solutions? Or do we just use the technology that's available through different software providers and off-the-shelf products in order to be able to configure that easily into our existing or into our organization? And then lastly, and that's kind of starting to introduce a little bit around the theme of today's topic, which is around the people and culture. Who's actually going to use this, and what does it mean, and how do we actually deploy it and implement it successfully in a safe, accessible, and transparent way, making sure it has the most amount of impact for our organization? So I guess really the question, Marianna, back to you again, is what's the easiest way? And are there certain things that we need to watch out for a successful journey embarking on AI?
So there are multiple different stages. I'll start with at the very beginning, when an organization, and totally irrespective of whether an organization is technologically mature or whether an organization is really at the very, very beginning in digital in general, the most important thing that we have seen time and time again really paying off is focusing on quick wins. Why do I say this? At the very beginning, when an organization has not delivered lots of AI-driven outcomes and insights, sometimes having a North Star that it is really far away and possibly 2 or 3 years away to be implemented can create a lot of disappointment, unnecessary disappointment to the people that are initially invested in it. So in order to really gain momentum, an organization, of course, has to have these more long-term North Stars in order to achieve business outcomes with AI. But also there will be some smaller, quicker wins that have to be identified, and starting with those will give people a little bit more inspiration to focus on that. Because to start with an AI journey, there is something very important at the very beginning. Executive sponsorship, the people element, and the buy-in of senior people within an organization is absolutely necessary, because if this doesn't exist, then it's very unlikely that there will be resources and teams and skill set developed towards this direction. So in order to gain momentum and to increase the number of people who are interested and eventually work towards these initiatives, you have to just get them excited little by little with things that are small but effective, and they make people's life easier, and they are also a little bit impressive and cool and attract interest within an organization. So later on,
yeah, and those are great, great nuggets in terms of really important things to watch out for at the very beginning, and then kind of once you build a little bit of momentum, it's really important to understand. It's very important to bring that business, along in that journey. I've seen all too many examples over the years where the IT departments have essentially tried to introduce or bring in different new technologies into the business, but actually haven't brought the business along on that journey. So it's really, really important to bring the stakeholders along, make sure you identify the value that's going to be delivered back into the business, and then include them throughout that journey as you progress. The next piece is around the enduring operating model. And what we mean by that is, and it kind of goes back to the point around do you build it, do you buy it? Whatever your decision is in terms of your operating model, it's making sure that you've got the support in place to make sure that as you build out and start to develop some of those AI-enabled solutions, that you've got a mechanism in place to be able to continually train, to be able to provide the support necessary to make sure it always has a positive impact on the business. As you start to slowly introduce some of these concepts and some of these solutions, they will start to have an impact on some of your business critical processes. So it's really important that you actually start to think about your SOPs, your internal, but your external stakeholders as well, in terms of how these solutions might impact them. And then lastly, as you start to get into a scaled program, it's about trying to make sure you've got that asset of libraries, so the library of assets available. And by that I mean is you should start to see some economies of scale once you start to build that out of reusable assets that you can start to really develop as you begin to really progress your AI journey. And it's really important to make sure that you get those economies once you be able to leverage some of those assets that are in your library. And then lastly, and this is the really important part, is making sure you've got a backlog of new initiatives and ideas. And just to go back to my point around the mural board, that is actually a really important thing to have. And while some of those ideas might not necessarily be helpful for your organization, they might not be relevant, it's important that you continually ideate and try to get new areas. And as you start to understand the areas where AI could be applicable in your organization, that you make sure that you start to target new areas and functions across your business, so that you've constantly got a backlog to make sure that the team are always got new ideas to keep focusing on.
Are we forgetting something, Dean?
I think we might actually be. So for the first time in my career, I believe it's actually data quality has now become sexy.
So garbage in, garbage out is the term that we are using from the very beginning of our career, both me and team. And we have tried multiple times to convince clients that this is much more important than developing a complex algorithm or creating another dashboard and focus on data quality and the many data quality issues that, let's be honest, every single organization has. We weren't very successful, and I don't think that data quality has ever been seen as a sexy element of analytics or AI deployment so far. But for the first time with generative AI, we see a shift in this direction. Why is that? Because a generative AI algorithm will be actually a mirror of the quality of the organization knowledge, enterprise knowledge and data that we have. And that means that if you have really poor quality data or unvetted data sitting behind the generative AI algorithm, the results seemingly might be okay, but gradually, little by little, you might see dissemination of misinformation through the organization, even outside the organization, if you have an external facing generative AI application. And let's agree that there is no chance that this will be beneficial, and it might actually do more harm than good. And in that particular case, now we see really organizations for the first time really focus, try to understand what are the best practices for improving data quality, moving on, improving data quality of the existing data sets and monitoring how data quality improves over time. And this is a long journey, but it's going quite well. So on that front, I have been asked multiple times a question that data scientists always had as a debate, whether an AI algorithm is more important than good data quality. The reality is that you need both of them to be at a good standard, but at the moment, the community of data scientists goes to the consensus that it's much more likely to be damaged by poor data quality than a not very optimized algorithm. And a not very optimized algorithm can always be improved over time, but data quality that is poor, especially when you have no idea that the quality of your data is poor, can be extremely damaging and very, very quickly really lead to bad results. This is, though, by no means a message from us to you to say that if you have some data quality issues, you should absolutely correct every single data set before you consider AI or Gen AI applications. But this is something that hopefully and gradually will work in parallel to build better data and better algorithms and more AI applications in parallel. This is the model that we believe that actually works. So, some key remarks.
Yeah, so like over the last, I would say, number of months and probably over the last year or so, we've seen an absolute plethora of POCs. But I guess what's really important to understand is that a POC is not free. It costs you time, whether it's invested time from out of the business, and it does cost you money of some description. So I guess kind of 4 key takeaways to leave you with today. 1, choose carefully. I mean, what we mean by that is choose your use cases carefully that you're going to invest in. And there's probably 3 key areas that I would always kind of bucket them into. Your AI use case either needs to help you make money, it helps you save money, or mitigate risk. Either one of those will help you really get started and make sure you avoid that trough of disillusionment that we talked about earlier. Second is around investing widely in the technology. Are you going to build it or are you going to buy it? It's about trying to understand, really important to think about what is AI going to do and how is it going to be used in your organization. And that will help you understand a little bit around the technology piece. The other just point note around that is that it's more than likely the case that you actually have technology already on your tech stack, AI technology already on your tech stack through some of your other software providers. So it's really about trying to understand about what you already have on your existing tech stack before you start to invest in anything further. Thirdly is around talent, and it's about making sure that you bring your people along in that journey. you invest into training and keep your organization upskilled in some of those new technologies. And lastly, as Marianna has rightly pointed out, it's about fixing your data as well. So Marianna, have you kind of seen any real examples in terms of areas where some of the AI has been really successfully deployed from your clients?
Yes, absolutely. And by no means, again, I want to highlight we are not trying to pass on the message that it's all dark and sad in the AI space. It's actually the opposite. We see lots of implementation. Three main areas have dominated the interest of companies, and I have seen actual results already in these three areas. The first one is cognitive assistance. So using AI or generative AI to do mundane, repetitive tasks that no one really enjoys doing, but they have to be done. And then you just assign this to AI. And most of the times, actually, it saves a lot of time and people can focus on more important tasks. The second bit is a more new, but actually is really exciting. It's hyper-personalization. Is the ability of giving insights or responses to customers that are special and know exactly what the customer needs or what are their potential characteristics that might affect the questions that they might ask. And in that sense, you can actually give a much better customer experience very quickly in whatever communications you might have with customers. And the final bit, and all of us, we have been to one extent familiar with this or another, is content generation. Of course, we have seen ChatGPT replying to questions or writing little emails or just correcting our spelling mistakes or something like that, but it can go to extremely more complicated and interesting versions. For example, the writing of automatic bids or responding to specific, more complex queries that we have to work on, saving a lot of time from our everyday working life. Right. So before we close this section, which was more the introductory element and what we see in AI, I want to leave you with one quote that really, really meant a lot to me when I read it a long time ago. AI is a tool, it's not a person. It's about as creative as a paintbrush, which means that we are the artist and AI is the paintbrush. So we have to use it to create masterpieces. And with that, I will just hand you over to Tim to give his quote, his favorite quote about AI.
Yeah, and I guess really before we wrap up with one of my favorite quotes, I guess really is to kind of bring you back to a question just a few moments ago, back at the very start when I asked, is it a revolution or an evolution? I think we're absolutely in a revolution now. Some of the real positive examples that we've seen AI to really help transform organizations have been really, really powerful, and if used in the right way, can have a massive impact in terms of how we do our jobs today. And I guess really on that note, if we kind of leave you with one final quote, and that is, it's not AI that's going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI might. The organizations are investing heavily into upskilling their people and making sure that they stay relevant with how AI can be used in an organization. So we really encourage you to kind of think about just exactly in that context, how it can be used in your organization today. So that's the end of the kind of the first introduction section, and now we're going to move into a little bit around now how to embed AI into the future workplace. And what this is going to really focus on is, can AI actually enhance what makes human work today? So this is all about the human differentiator. So we're kind of moving away from the technology now and looking at it more from the human lens and the side of the people element of how to introduce and change the culture, which is actually a really, really important part of any digital transformation, but specifically it has a massive impact on AI. When I think back to nearly 10 years ago when I first joined EY and I set up the intelligent automation capability it was back then, and there was a real focus on, at that point, what was robotic process automation, RPA. And the key question that I used to always get from a lot of clients that we worked with, and particularly those in the business, was, is RPA or is it robotics going to replace my job? And essentially, was it going to replace the human needs in our workplace? Now, I think that's what that question still very much applies in the context of AI. And last year, Microsoft conducted a work trend index. It was in May last year, just to understand a little bit more about how actually, if we really look at the technology in a positive lens, how could that actually really impact or change the way in which organizations and particularly people actually think about AI in their jobs. So when we look at some of the challenges that kind of came back from that survey, so 64% of people struggle with having the time and energy to do their job. And when we look at some of the context behind that, it's really around that sort of repetitive routine, the mundane aspects of particularly from the administration elements, or some of the enabling functions in the back office. There's a huge amount of potential to really transform and remove some of that repetitive activity. And that's really around, you can see that 64% of people, that's what they don't enjoy doing about their job. And if I was to actually try to bring that to life a little bit, whenever I'm doing sort of facilitating workshops with organizations to help sort of tease out some of those potential use cases, and we talked about that mural board earlier on with the sort of the post-it notes, one of the questions that I always ask is, what do you not like doing about your job today? Or what elements of your job actually frustrate you the most? And that's where we tend to see a huge amount of influx and ideas coming through, because a lot of people there is a high volume of frustration in terms of just they would love to be able to remove a lot of that element of the repetitiveness out of their job. Next was 62% of people spend too much time searching for information during the workday. And I guess really that's where AI could be a really, really powerful tool or an enabler in terms of being able to really help you be a lot more productive. And that kind of goes back to just the quote that I used about it's not AI that's going to replace your job, but someone who knows how to use AI might. And if you think about it in that context, in terms of actually AI being used as an enabler rather than necessarily something that's going to replace what it is that you do today. And there's a huge amount of potential if we think about, being able to use AI in that context to be able to help you go off into the different tools and assets available to be able to help you search for certain information to allow you to, whether it's a piece of research you're doing or whether it's a presentation, but allow you to be able to, really accelerate that process of being able to complete your task. 60% of leaders say that a lack of innovation or breakthrough of ideas is a concern. And you can see, if I kind of do a bit of a brief scan, looking across all the sort of the industries and some of the sectors that we would work in on a daily basis, you can see that some of those sectors are investing heavily into this space, and they're the ones that are really accelerating through and making significant progress. And ultimately, those are the ones that are starting to get to that plateau of productivity and really start to achieve some of the really positive outcomes in the context of AI. And I guess this really some of those sectors are starting to get left behind, and that's where that is a real concern in terms of as other industries start to actually make significant progress. There is going to be a little bit of a difference in terms of some areas where they'll not be able to see that acceleration. 82% of leaders say that employees will need new skills to be prepared for the growth of AI, and that's something that's really, really, really important. And actually, as an organization globally, EY have been investing heavily into their people across all service lines for the last number of years. And in fact, it's actually something that's now embedded into our annual goals in terms of learning and development and training, and it's something that's become a core part of our business. This is going to impact all different areas, whether it's not just from a technology or a data lens, it's across all service lines, whether it's tax, or whether it's assurance, or whether it's some of our strategic offerings. This is going to really significantly transform, and that's what we're always encouraging some of our clients to really think about as well, in terms of just even from a low complex introductory level, start to bring in some of those training elements to make sure that people are prepared for the revolution that is to come. 76% of people would be comfortable using AI for admin tasks. And we've got a really, really good demo coming up shortly that will really help bring to life exactly just how that could be how that could be used in a very simple format, using very simple technology, but minimizing and mitigating some of that potential risk at the same time. So I'll maybe just pause that one and come back to it. And then lastly, that leaders are 2 times more interested in using AI to increase productivity than to cut headcount. And that's actually something that's really interesting. Just come back to my analogy again from the start around the example of some workforce concerned around robots replacing. But actually, when you think about if you can remove some of that routine, repetitive administration element of jobs, but actually use that time rather than necessarily trying to cut heads, but actually become more innovative and more productive, and actually focusing on the value-added activities, that's when you start to really unlock some of that potential. So in the context of the work, then there's a bit of a really interesting lens around the people's perspective. So 70% of digital transformation programs fail because of the lack of a human-centric approach. And as someone, as I mentioned, who's delivered many different types of technologies over the years, what tends to be all too forgotten about is actually the people and the business and the humans, making sure they're always at the center of every transformation. Failing to consider the human needs and perspectives and experience will lead to a very negative output. So it's really, really important that you always keep the humans at the center, and that particularly in the context of AI. 62% of those surveyed are worried about the potential biases and lack of transparency in an AI-driven decision-making, and particularly in the context of the workplace. And I guess that's really important to kind of think about just in some of the things that that balanced approach that we talked about, earlier on when actually adopting AI. And it is around that perception. But it goes back to the point around making sure that you choose your use cases and you choose your technology in the right way. There's a lot of things to be given consideration to, particularly the likes of, the EU AI Act coming out, and, in the public sector, obviously there's the AI strategies released by the government, etc. So there's a number of different things that need to be given consideration to. But that's where about making sure that you leverage the right level of support, both externally, but also selecting the right technology, you might be able to actually navigate through some of those challenges at ease. Lastly, around AI upskilling. So 40% of those surveyed estimated that the workforce need to be reskilled as a result of implementing AI-enabled solutions over the next 3 years. And that is a really important statistic, and it kind of goes back to some of the core themes around the topic of today's topic, where it's about making sure the humans are always at the center. As an organization, that we've seen significant amount of innovation through some of the demos that we built internally, but also there are people coming forward that are really passionate about this, that maybe wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity before. So I think it's really important that you actually think about that training element as you really start to begin to embark on your AI journey. So what's really, really interesting here is around part of that survey that was conducted is about looking at it from two different lenses. One is the people versus the employer's expectation. So we focus just on the employee use of generative AI in the workplace just for a few moments. So 22% of those surveyed were actually currently using it. And that might be in the context of maybe using it for ChatGPT or maybe using it for DALL-E to create images. But that is in the context of it, it's a very low percentage. 27 plan to use it in the next 12 months. 32% do not plan to use it in the next 12 months. And 19% don't know. So if you kind of look at that at an overall level, there's over 50% are still in that book where they're not using it, they don't know how to use it, and there's still an element of confusion. So I think there's a lot of work still needs to be done around actually the education piece in terms of being able to understand how exactly this could be used in the context of being able to help employees in the workplace. Then from the employer perspective, 38% are currently using it. 46% plan to use it in the next 12 months, and 13% do not plan to use in the next 12 months or don't know. So we can actually, it's really interesting then from an employer perspective then, there's actually a huge amount more excitement, and overall 84% actually see a huge amount of potential by leveraging this technology really help transform the workplace. So I guess maybe take a moment and pass over to Marianna, who's going to talk a little bit around how we can realize that value.
Yes, and I'll try to link back my really, really want analogy to the next slide. So I mentioned at the very beginning that the companies, businesses really need to understand what they really want to achieve in order to get what they want from AI, and the number of use cases. Tim mentioned the endless murals with thousands of little post-its and ideas. And the reality is that there is not one certain way to cut this in order to identify exactly the ideas, the use cases that will deliver value. And we're here just to highlight and mention that we see three main lenses that ideally should work synergetically in order to understand what is a good AI use case that will actually pay off. The first one is the organization. So initially, and when we talk about AI and delivering value through AI, I think that naturally most people are thinking how we can generate more revenue or how we can cut costs. or how we can actually do things faster, create efficiencies for an organization. And this is really important, and it is definitely one lens that has to be covering everything, and it is something that has to be present always. But then there is an element of the individuals and the teams and the sub-teams, and depending on the structure that work in this organization, that can actually lead us to understand exactly what use cases we actually need. So for example, at an individual level, we might need to create a more efficient way for people generating content in order to be more effective in other parts of work. That helps a team have more time for ideation or for training to developing their skills. And this same application helps an organization making more impact to their customers by generating more content faster, responding to the queries in a faster pace, and actually paying off in terms of the effectiveness, in terms of more monetary financial metrics. So seeing use cases from all these lenses simultaneously will actually help you understand what you really, really want and what you really, really need to achieve in order for AI implementation. And this is a kind of new thinking team. I don't know if you agree with me, but in the past, we would focus quite more on the organizational benefits and what would be the financial benefits, and wouldn't see necessarily how it goes down to the individual, but definitely the dial has shifted, and we are definitely now considering many more aspects of one use case and application. On the next slide, and in the interest of time, I will just touch upon it. There are multiple different work patterns or standard approaches that we take, that we believe that they are very relevant to Gen AI applications. And I mentioned a few of them in the slides before, like content generation or replacement of mundane repetitive tasks. And also there is one that I want to highlight here among the others, which is the repurposing. Repurposing means that when a team has generated a specific, let's say, type of document, which might be a response to clients, that happens again and again and time, and over the years, you might have to repeat similar reports or similar responses. This good work that has happened in the past, now with AI and Gen AI, can actually become repeatable in a much, much faster way, for example. And this is one of the work patterns that can actually be targeted in order to generate efficiency very quickly. So in the interest of time, I think we should go to show you our first demo. So we allow time for questions, and team now will jump into Copilot.
Sounds good. Thank you, Marianna. So really the first one, just to help bring it to life, and some of you may already be aware of this, but for those of you not, so Microsoft launched a product which is essentially aimed at addressing all those different considerations that need to be thought about that we referenced earlier when deploying AI. So 365 Copilot essentially integrates into all of the existing applications that you use today, allowing us to be able to focus on some of those more value-add activities, and really unleashing creativity, unlocking creativity, and upskilling as you go along. Now, what's really, really interesting about Copilot is that, from a security, compliance, privacy, and overall just a responsible AI perspective, all of that is already included as part of the product. So, if you're thinking about that sort of set of core principles, then they've kind of packaged that up as part of their offering. So what we've got is a series of short demos really to help bring it to life. So if you think about Copilot in the context of Outlook, you can see that the user here has created, essentially it's opened up Outlook, a new email, and what it's done is it's asked Copilot in order to be able to create a short email, and it's given them a small amount of context. So it's essentially asked Lily to be able to create a draft presentation, draft email, and in relation to the supply chain session tomorrow. Next one then is in the context of Teams. So you can see it's asking for some updates, and what it's able to do is then summarize some of the uploading a number of different documents. You can then ask him to summarize this in terms of some of the key updates from the previous day and in relation to that specific project. And the next one is in the context of Word. Again, going back to Marianna's example earlier around the sort of the proposals, etc. What you can see here is that you're uploading several meeting notes and another document. And what you're asking Copilot to do is essentially draft your presentation or draft your proposal in relation to a specific task. And another one is in the context of PowerPoint. So you can use PowerPoint. You can give it a simple prompt to say, can you create a short presentation based on a specific CV or uploading another type of document? And what it does then is it creates that presentation. It's in draft format, and then you're able to make the necessary adjustments. I think what's really, really interesting about Copilot, and I've got another example just to help bring it to life a little bit more in a few moments, but it's your Copilot, so it's something that sits alongside you as a user. And I remember actually attending a presentation a number of weeks ago, whereby we were referencing some of these examples, and someone in the audience actually said that we asked the question, has anybody used or heard of Copilot? And one of the attendees actually said they had, but they were struggling a little bit because actually the Copilot, whenever they wanted to create emails, etc., was actually far too polite, and it wasn't necessarily the right tone as to how they would usually write their emails. So over the course of time, they were trying to train the Copilot to be a little bit more tailored to exactly this, how they would typically write their emails in terms of the tone and some of the format, etc. So really, I've got one more example. Just to take a few moments, and this should only take 2 or 3 minutes. But you can see I've got a simple whiteboard here. And this is an example of where we created this one previously, but simply I asked Copilot then to suggest some ideas for an interactive AI event. You can see in the background then two other team members are also inserting their own ideas simultaneously as Copilot is drafting ideas based on the prompt. Copilot will return 6 ideas, and essentially what I've asked it to do is to generate more. So it gives me an additional 6 ideas, making total 12, as you can see inserted here. So on the whiteboard, I wanted to insert my own ideas, so I write AR and AI combination showcase, and I then categorize. I select the categorize, and Copilot will automatically bucket the ideas under 4 different headings, color coding each group, as you can see. I can then select summarize, so the Copilot loads and then returns a number of participants, date, amount of ideas generated, and then the 4 key themes that are evident throughout the whiteboard. And you can see all of that is all happening in the background. Following this, what I'll be able to do is I can pull up the Teams meeting window and explain, a little bit around how we can kind of come up with some of those ideas. So using Copilot in Teams, I ask Copilot to list all the action items. Let me just wait for a few moments until it comes up. And in the interest of time, let's skip forward a little bit because as I said, we want to leave some time for Q&A. So we can see we've brought up the teams. Copilot gives one action for each attendee on the call based on what we've discussed and agreed. And then what we do is we ask Copilot to suggest the following questions based on our discussion, and return some great questions that could be used for the basis of the following call. And then lastly, to finish, you can see the transcription behind those action items and how it was generated to show how Copilot can actually create those. So conscious that we probably move through that a little bit quickly, but you can just see through some of the ideas, if used in the correct way, it can really help change the way in which you might have approached that task previously, and introducing to something that's a little bit more of an innovative approach to get some new ideas using the technology available. I might now pass over to Marianna just to take you through the next demo.
Yes, and I'll be super quick with each demo, so very, very quickly. So one thing that as a data scientist for 12 years has been extremely difficult so far was interacting and training videos to identify things. So how many people are in this picture, or how many vehicles passed from this road, or for example, using camera data to quality control drug manufacturing processes. It required data of 2, 3, 4 years training. It was extremely expensive, and sometimes it was not even successful. With generative AI and multimodal techniques, if you can go to the next slide, team, we can do this without training. There is a way of actually importing one video to a generative AI algorithm and then ask in natural language questions. In this particular case, we have a video of employees. Some of them are using safety gear, some of them aren't. And we will pose the question from this video, how many employees you see wearing their safety gear and how many aren't. And as you will see, and if the video is uploaded, and Tim, if you just go a little bit further after the middle of the video, just in the interest of time, you can we is there a way to click? Oh, sorry, we've missed it. The video, yes, automatically just watches the image and then says there are 7 employees, of which 4 are wearing the safety gear, and the number actually dynamically changes frame by frame without any training. And this is a huge advancement because it makes a very, very complex task much, much cheaper. So a next demo, a next idea, something a little bit more relevant to most organization: payroll. So knowledge management generally for policy heavy areas has been very, very difficult so far, especially if you were a new employee that you had to help customers with queries. You had to learn each and every line of policy. This is a bot that helps employees, and actually it is deployed by EY at the moment, helps employees across different countries understand payroll related queries depending on the location of they are. So this particular case, it asks whether in Armenia there was a tax amount difference and why this happens. And the bot reads, let's say, and has the knowledge of all policies of the entire company within every single country, and is able to provide actually where it found the information and a response automatically, which saves a lot of time for teams that won't need to actually now respond to queries employee by employee, and they can focus on doing actual payroll activities than responding to queries. Last one, team.
Yeah, thank you, Marianna. And I think this one, lastly, has been hugely powerful in terms of just the unlocking some of the potential of some of our clients. So we've delivered this one now for quite a number of clients across the island of Ireland. And really it's about, obviously all products, particularly in the retail space, come with a different sort of level of VAT. So essentially what we've got here is a bit of it's like their own internal chat GPT, but specifically focusing on VAT. So what we've got here is essentially a solution which loads all of the client data from a number of different types of files, whether it's Excel, CSV, and those files include the different product details and obviously VAT rates. What we're doing is that we're then enhancing this data with additional inputs from country-specific legislation, ensuring the accuracy and also the relevance of that data. After cleaning and organizing the data, just going back to Marianna's point earlier around making sure that data quality is of the utmost, we produce a comprehensive table showing each product with its full details. And again, just in the interest of time, what I want to do is just fast forward through to that point. We then use generative AI in order to be able to detect any VAT rate misclassifications by analyzing the enriched data against the legislative standards and also ingredients lists. Currently, both the data gathering and the classification processes are manually, but we've been able to automate these aspects essentially and enrich the data, the demo, as you can see above. The chatbot then, which you'll see in a few moments, then allows the users to essentially interactively query, the product information, the VAT details, and more importantly, by aiding tax professionals in their decision-making process. And I guess lastly, I suppose this demo really highlights the fact that the VAT analyzer can streamline that data processing and improve that VAT compliance effectively. So as you can see, this is the chatbot that I was referencing. Again, that's that internal ChatGPT, if you like, specifically for VAT analyzer. And you can see it's asking, the prompt here is provide a list of products where a 0% VAT rate has been applied, and then the AI solution then is starting to calculate that in the background. It's looking through the information that's already been uploaded, and it's come back with 4 different products initially. And then what you can do is then the user will then go back with a further prompt, from these lists, which of them So then it's gone back, it's asked to list then which of these products are medicines, because there's a very specific classification needs to be applied to medicines, and it's come back with one answer. So hopefully some of those demos resonated with some of you, and I guess I'm just conscious of time, so I think on that note I might hand back to Jason.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Marianna. That's really interesting.
Thank you.
And it's a really interesting topic, and the questions, a couple of questions that come through on similar themes actually. So I'm probably going to explore the same theme across a couple here, but I'll just ask them one at a time. So somebody has said the efficiencies are very impressive. Curious about potential for plagiarism in the outputs created as these large language models rely on fast inputs from other authors. I know some studies have identified plagiarism, and also any comment on privacy issues. So sort of linked around plagiarism and privacy there.
So I can take on the plagiarism element. So generative AI by nature is plagiarizing because it's using content that has been written before, or even if it's videos or anything like that, existing content. And with the knowledge and the context that the user provides, it repurposes something that, because it comes though from that many sources, you cannot necessarily detect what sentence or what little element comes from. So generative AI is not supposed to generate, let's say, totally original content, but more to answer questions or help you do a task around content generation. So in that sense, I wouldn't necessarily say that if someone is, let's say, asked by a university to do original content and to write the PhD thesis, they should use generative AI for that, because in that sense, there is, of course, the question of, is this plagiarism? Possibly, to an extent it is. But for our more business-related queries, the things that we are doing for work, I would say that plagiarism is less of a problem. Let's say it's not something that anyone will chase us about. So in that sense, it's much better or safer or more ethical to use it. In terms of the security, so the privacy of our data, this is an unanswered, it's not a fully answered question at the moment. Most of the deployments at the moment that we have on the cloud have certain levels of privacy available by default, which can be increased with different tiers and different pricing strategies, etc. But I would say, and I think there is a similar question around that always at a case-by-case level, use case by use case level, we can only identify whether customer data or business data are safe to be used through a generative AI algorithm. There is not one size fits all. We have seen, and I have seen, and working with clients that have decided that 10 use cases are good to go, but 3 are blocked because they have sensitive data that they cannot use under this application. So it's not black and white. It's more complicated, which is not necessarily the best answer I can give, but it's true.
And I think that links to one of the other questions, where are there data security risks for sensitive client data? And for example, in our own organization, we're seeing a sort of scaled back version of Copilot that's not learning the history of what's in there. And I guess it's a trade-off between security and then the machine learning element of it.
That's correct.
So another question that's there is an interesting one. What's the most convenient way, and I don't think it's possible, what's the most convenient way of discovering whether correspondence or some sort of work has been generated by AI? Is that possible?
If someone solves this 100%, I think they will make a lot of money. There are algorithms at the moment, and people have gained awards because they are developing reverse engineering algorithms to identify what is the percentage of generative AI content. I know that we will get there, and I know that at some point, if a response is totally bot generated, possibly there will be even regulations forcing a company saying that this content was generated by AI. So you're not talking to a real agent. But at the moment, I wouldn't say that you can click a button and algorithmically determine that certainly something was AI or not.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There is one other question that's in there. I'm not sure that it's for yourselves, but somebody talking about setting their FAEs this summer and keeping an eye out on what's topical, and lecturers saying what is topical is examinable. I don't think I'm going to ask you to comment on whether you think that AI is going to be covered in the FAEs this year, but I think in terms of what's topical, it's probably right up there, right?
I think that this is the year of AI, and I think that the AI safety, security, AI ethics might be very topical as well, and also how humans will be using in the workplace AI. I think all these topics are extremely discussed, so maybe examinable.
Good answer, Marianna. Very good. In the interest of time, we're at the top of the hour, so I think we'll close off the Q&A there. But thank you to people for contributing. So I just want to say thank you to Tim and Marianna for such an interesting session. Thank you to people that did contribute in the Q&A, and thanks to everybody. So many people actually who joined today's session. The recording is going to be available for you shortly. As I mentioned at the start, today's the first in a two-part mini-series on the topic of AI. I'm delighted to say that the next event is going to be an in-person event held at the Institute's offices in Hall Street in Belfast, and that's on Wednesday, the 29th of May. So just watch out for further details to follow soon on that. From a CAB point of view, we also do have a company visit coming in May, so watch out for that. The details will be coming out very soon. And our CAB lunch, which is of course the highlight of the year from a CAB committee point of view, is on the 13th of June, and you'll see some details coming out about that very, very soon. So with that, just one more time, I want to thank our fantastic speakers, of course the Institute team for all the support, and all of you in attendance for supporting today's event. See you at another event soon, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you for having us.